Massive Impact is a startup focused on helping the consumer understand the complexities of what goes into making the amazing outdoor gear and apparel that we all use. Only in the past few years have I come to think about what I purchased and what that impact was on the environment, the place that I was trying to support. It only recently occurred to me that I might actually be doing damage to the lands that I love by supporting brands who didn't give a. That was a wake-up call for me. And I knew I wasn't alone in not having a center of gravity, not having one place that could be trusted. It became evident to me that I probably wasn't the only one who cared about how the people were treated that were making these items. Our goal is to have as many conversations as possible with thought leaders and influencers and manufacturers and athletes. We're here to tell the stories of those that care. And of course, Patagonia is leading the charge. There are a ton of others, including independent brands that you should know about. This video podcast is just the beginning. Sign up for the newsletter at massiveimpact.co. Join us in this revolution. I see the merit in the squeeze of parents. No need to sugarcoat it. I see the need for being married, but who would condone it when your dreams of being married? Hello, and welcome to the Massive Impact Sustainability Podcast. My name is Dave Mayer, and I'm joined by Margot Johnson, one of our team members, and one of my favorite people in the sustainability realm, Derek Sabori. The idea behind our podcast is to become a trusted resource for consumers around the world to understand how to navigate the complexities of buying sustainably made gear and apparel. And, I'm a startup geek and longtime entrepreneur and, relatively new to this realm. This all came about for me as I was trying to buy a snowboard jacket about a year and a half ago, and really was not able to find something that was both cool and did not pollute our rivers and streams and air. And so that was really concerning for me, and I knew I wasn't alone. So that was the beginning of this journey. So Margot, maybe you can tell us a little bit about yourself and how you ended up here.
So I'm Margot Johnson. I'm a social worker and product person. So kind of an unusual social worker. I work at the intersection of social good, social impact, business, and technology. So thinking about how do we reduce harm and increase good in the world through for-profit endeavors. And that can range from building the newest application to the kinds of products that we purchase on a day-to-day basis. So I've been working in startups for the last few years, currently based in Austin, Texas, and excited to learn more about this space generally, how I can make better decisions as a consumer, and also educate myself more about what's coming up in the spaces that I like to play in, the outdoors. Like how can I be a better advocate for these spaces in the ways that I engage with them?
Awesome. And thank you for that. And Derek, super happy for you to join us. Maybe you can just give us the 30,000 foot level, and we can dig in on specifics. I was fortunate enough to spend some time with Derek at Outdoor Retailer in July, and thrilled that he can join us on the video podcast here.
Thanks, Dave. Yeah, Derek Sabori. I'm a sustainability advisor, consultant, a sustainable fashion teacher, a brand builder myself, and just sort of an advocate for sustainability learning, and purchasing and consuming in mostly the brand and the brand space. So passionate about it. Happy to be here. Looking forward to a good conversation with you guys.
Yeah. Margot, I'll let you start it off.
Well, I've heard a little bit already, Derek, from Dave about your diverse background and the kind of this long journey and all the different unique roles that you've been in. I'd love to, if you want to start us from the beginning and tell us a little bit about your journey into this space and some of the main milestones along the way, so we have some context into where you come from.
Yeah, sure. It was definitely was a winding path. I always like to joke about the fact that I did not come from the sustainability space or anything environmental necessarily. My degree was in studio art after I changed my major from being an engineering major. So I got an art degree. I stumbled into Volcom basically just looking for a summertime job. And Volcom is a really, if you're not familiar with, a surf and skate brand, a board sports brand here in Costa Mesa, California. And they were just a small company back then. This was 95, 96. And they had an opportunity for me. They were looking for somebody to answer their phones, basically like an internship. They couldn't pay me. They gave me some T-shirts and hats. I did that for a couple days, which led a couple of weeks. And before you know it, I had a part-time gig there. But I eventually worked in the production department. I got hired full-time, managing and buying raw materials. So I was doing all of their fabric and trim purchasing when they did everything domestically. And that led to merchandising and design, where I became a manager. And while I was there working on the product side, that's when I really got exposed to just better materials and people who were doing cool things. And back then, what we were calling the eco space, and sort of things were still being called green back then. And, you know, the more I learned about it, the more passionate I became about it. And we ended up forming a little club there while I was at Volcom, and it was just a little way for everybody to get excited about being more sustainably minded. And sort of the more that I did, the more people looked to me as the expert, even though I wasn't, and the more that they expected expert opinions from me, the more I went and learned. And that eventually led to a full-time job there, being the head of their sustainability program. So I was there at Volcom for 19 years. I left as their vice president of global sustainability, and it's a great opportunity working with them, working with their parent company, who is Caring. And I learned a lot from their sustainability team there. But after 19 years, though, I went out on my own to start my own brand with my partner. His name's Troy Eckert, and we started a brand called KOZM in the men's yoga space. And basically, we wanted to do everything that I had learned or been doing in sustainability, everything that I've been striving for. We wanted to, specifically implement that into a new brand and kind of show that it could be done based on that sort of checklist. So in the meanwhile, I also started teaching. I'm building a sustainable fashion certificate program for a local college here in Costa Mesa, Orange Coast College. So I've taught there for a while, and now we're just starting the first of the series, sort of an overview of sustainability course for them. So went back for my MBA as well while I was at Volcom. So I've kind of got multiple areas of interest and expertise, and I'm still building my career, I guess, as we go.
And still doing some consulting work for Volcom, is that correct?
I do, yeah. So they were awesome. Even though I left to go start my own brand, they were so good to me. I mean, we had a really good, long relationship, and they're making a lot of really good headway in their sustainability program. We started that back in, 2005 or 6 or so. So it's been years. So they definitely weren't ready to let that go, and they were gracious enough to hire me back. And I do a lot of work with them, still representing them on almost all of their environmental sustainability programs for them.
Awesome.
That's really impressive. You have a really unique perspective in terms of both a really large organization and understanding what their sustainability opportunities and challenges are, and also starting your own endeavor and kind of getting to bring all those best practices, but then you're still a tiny company having to build from the ground up. So can you share with us, given that not a lot of people get to wear both those hats, what are some of the similarities and differences between those two kinds of businesses and those two sizes of businesses?
Well, what's funny is there were really interesting perspectives. One, because even coming from Volcom, which felt like such a big brand, and it was such an important brand in the board sports space, especially. But even once Caring took over the brand, and I went over to France for the first time to do a global sustainability meeting with all of their brands, I remember being really humbled by actually how small Volcom was in the big scheme of things compared to their mega brands that they had. So that was an interesting perspective. And then once we started KOZM, though, that was another interesting perspective, because coming from those bigger brands and having such a support unit and a support team and having infrastructure, expertise, and just financial resources, starting our own brand was also really humbling, because you go into it feeling like an expert, especially having done it for 20 years or so. But once you're doing everything on your own and starting from scratch, it's a really different, it's a different beast. And yeah, there's a lot of work, and we're doing everything domestically and building our own supply chain. So we're not right now working through any agents or, kind of manufacturing vendors. We're sourcing yarns, converting those yarns into fabric cutting, trimming, doing our markers, grading, buying all the trims, kind of doing everything the old way that I learned how to do it, doing product domestically. So yeah, it's been a really neat opportunity to work with that biggest collection of brands, being Caring and all their global brands, to Volcom, and then working on the tiny little space with just a couple of us building this really small and fun brand.
I wouldn't mind backing up a little bit to how you got to be passionate about this space, and what was it that the light went off that this was really something that you wanted to focus on for, foreseeable future. Obviously, you didn't know it'd be 20 years at that point, but was it something in particular that you saw about the supply chain that bothered you, or that you wanted to improve, or where did the light go off?
So I think there were a couple defining moments for me, and I call them my flashpoint moments. But and it came down to people. So I had some really good influencers, so I can trace my spark back to very specific people. And one was Volcom's first designer. His name was Neil Harrison. He has a small little brand now called Stormy Monday. But he was somebody who, back then in the late 90s, early 2000s, we weren't talking about sustainability. He was just talking about having values, knowing that there were chemicals on these products that just had this, off-gassing, this smell that just didn't seem right, wondering how we were putting people through, how were people being treated, and just was stopping to question things more so than, we were used to happening, because at that time it was just about getting product done on time, at the right price, and kind of building your career. But for him to sort of stop and say, hey, I can't approve that. I don't like the way that looks, the way it smells. That doesn't seem safe. That was an eye-opener for me. And that was the first spot. And then two other people, a few others, Ethan Anderson, who was there, he was a pusher for that idea of building sort of a club. We called it a Ecological Society. And he was the one who suggested that I should be in charge of it. But really, he was helping to lead that charge and building a little team there. And then Isaac Nicholson, who was selling more sustainable fabrics and fibers way back then to us, letting me know that fashion could look different and still have great sustainability features. And then Frank Skura, who was doing the Action Sports Environmental Coalition at the time, trying to get brands to come together, tell their eco stories or their green stories, and bringing in athletes, artists, musicians to sort of paint this portrait that sustainability could be cool and could be done differently. But those guys, because of their style and who they were and what they were doing, they were guys that I could associate with and were doing things differently. And that was just sort of that light bulb moment for me. But as years and months went on, I would say once we had that small little group, we did a lunch and learn at the office, and we screened An Inconvenient Truth. And that was sort of the nail in the coffin for me. So I had all these guys, these my influencers, and I was like, hey, this is really interesting. I was doing a lot of changes at home. I watched that documentary, 2006, I think it was, and it was like, boom, that's it. That's what I'm doing. I sort of like in my head, I was frustrated that I had never learned any of that in school, in my multiple degrees, or through business, at that point. And it was just sort of those things. And a lot of people ask this, we say, why is nobody teaching us this? Why did we not know this? Why do I not know about this? And I remember at that moment just sitting in that room, just going, that's it. This is where my career is going, and this is what I'm going to be doing.
Yeah, I love that. I'd love to hear a little bit about your experience. I'm in Colorado, which is sort of a purple, if not blue state. Obviously, California is a blue state. Texas, red, but Austin, not so much. I'd love to understand if you find this to be, an apolitical issue these days, or is it just a bleeding heart liberal thing?
I think, it definitely should be an apolitical issue. There is for me, the idea of making product more sustainably, like there is no argument for it. It's such an easy sell. It's just, and so many brands will use this, but they'll say, hey, we started because it's just the right thing to do. So how can you possibly go and visit a factory and see effluent, coming out and going into lakes, rivers, streams, backfields or wherever, or see people being treated unfairly, or having this horrible smell of these chemicals that are on restricted lists and that have been deemed hazardous and unsafe. there's no justification for that. Are we learning as we go, and are we starting to figure out how, you mentioned the word complex. It's very complex. So I get that it takes time, but there really is no reason to push back on it and say, no, we shouldn't be doing this. It doesn't make sense, because our resources are limited. They're finite. The apparel industry and the goods industries pull from a lot of finite resources, and population is growing. There's more demand for our products. We have to do it smarter if we want to keep our businesses going on into the future. So it should be apolitical. I think it is. It's a pretty easy sell. Very rarely these days will you get people pushing back saying, yeah, no. I mean, to me, the old way is dead. There is only one way for the future, and it's this new way of doing business more responsibly, more ethically, and more sustainably, if you will.
Think if you can help give us something tangible to really bite into, because sometimes the word sustainability or sustainable apparel, it feels very nebulous, or it's like a green leaf or a star or a person's face on a label, but it's hard to get closer in than that, and most consumers don't have visibility into that supply chain. So can you walk us through all the kinds of decisions you're making throughout your supply chain, the ways you're thinking about messaging, the materials you're using, so we really understand kind of how that complexity breaks down within your brand?
Yeah, and I'll use the sort of the learnings that we came upon from working with Kering and their environmental profit and loss. This was really helpful for us, and that EP&L that they do, or the environmental profit and loss, that was a great opportunity for Volcom while I was working there, because that was environmental impact assessment all the way through the supply chain, right? So it's one thing to measure your footprint for the things that you own and operate in that tier 0 section, your warehouses, your retail stores, your distribution centers, but to be able to work with all of your suppliers for all the products that you do, all the way back to tier 4, to the raw materials, and then assess where the impacts fall, what percentage of them lies in which tier, and which areas are the most meaningful, whether it's greenhouse gas emissions, air pollution, water use, water pollution, et cetera, or land use. So what we found year over year from doing that, and what Kering has found in general, which a lot of LCA data will also tell you, that the biggest impacts come from the furthest back in your supply chain, right? So if raw material, and in some cases it's upwards of 65, 66, 67% of your impacts will come from raw materials and raw material processing. So right there, that gives you the answer of where you need to focus. So for us, when we did KOZM, that's why all the fibers that we chose, so we worked with Recover. So all of the fibers, most of the fibers in our line are upcycled cotton mixed with a recycled polyester, which eliminates that raw material source, right? So out of the process, so you eliminate that impact. Our yoga short, instead of being made from polyester or nylon, is made from organic cotton with a hemp blend and a small percentage of lycra in it. But all of our products are raw material specifically focused to make sure that we have the lowest impact. No plastic wrapping. We wrap everything in paper. We take our fabric scraps and use that as a tie to tie the packaging. This is very small scale, and it may not be the answer for large scale, but it works for us. We set up the company as a B Corp. We structured the company as a benefit corp, and then we're a certified B Corp as well. Even down to the bank that we chose a bank called New Resource Bank. We built in a give back so that we could give 5% of our sales to organizations who are doing things with yoga and giving back in their communities. And we're saving up to give back to the Warrior Spirit Retreat Foundation, which is a project by Dan Nevins, helping veterans heal through yoga. But really that fiber, even taken since the Recover yarns are dyed already, because the scraps are sorted by color, and your reds go with the reds and the blues and the grays. They mix those with a solution dyed polyester, which is a polyester that's dyed at that polymer level. But you get a yarn that's colored. You knit those goods. We don't have to send them out to be dyed again. And so we're saving a lot of water there. But wherever we do need color, we're printing onto those fabrics. So using less water, doing everything domestically for us helps save any shipping back and forth, helps us keep an eye on our factories, and just paying attention to the raw materials we source. Our goods are really they're designed to be very easy to recycle and take back. There's not a lot of trims, no leather, no plastic components on them. So at this point, I think I can pride ourselves that we are a plastic-free company. I'm trying to think even the metal zippers. I'm thinking zippers, but I don't think there's any plastic items on our goods. So trying to. I mean, it's a tiny, small scale for sure, but the goal was to sort of have that guideline and checkbook and be able to say, doing it, doing it, doing it, doing it. And then the goal is to continue to replicate that and grow with it and turn that into a study and a proof of concept that it can be done even as a brand grows.
Yeah. Well, the follow-up question I have to that is my brain goes, this is amazing. Like the complexity, the way you're thinking across the system. It's the kind of thing that I want to invest in personally when I think about strategically choosing how I want to spend my money, frankly. But the question that comes to mind is, of course, like, how does this impact the cost of goods? What does that look like for the end consumer in terms of what the cost of the end product is? And also the ways that you educate people to, if that cost is slightly higher than other things, how you educate people to help them understand why that cost is what it is.
Yeah, for let's say 2 different perspectives. So on the KOZM side, everything is more expensive, but it's also hard to tell because we're just so small and our units are small. Everything is small scale. So the cost is expensive. But what we also have in our business model is just a completely transparent supply chain and pricing model. So, and we're not the first to do all these things. You know, we've pulled from best practices from Patagonia and Everlane and Reformation and everybody who's doing all these great things. And we took it all and put it all into one. But we tell you where every component of ours, where it came from, the name of the factory, and not just where it was cut and sewn, but where the trims came from, what country they came from, what type of paper it was, everything we know, we share with our customers. We have a complete product story. And then every cost that we have, we share that as well to say, hey, here's what we're charging you, but here's what it cost us to make it so that there's understanding. So for us, it is a lot more expensive, but we price our products accordingly. But we probably should price them higher, to be honest, but we'll get through that later. But from the Volcom side, you know, they are doing, you know, implementing great raw materials using Reprieve recycled polyester, using Econyl recycled nylon, and even having a really good organic cotton program. And they're in a space where they can't afford to really raise their prices much, and they're able to, and they're doing it. So it can be done, but you've got to have more power in your supply chain, and you've got to have sort of access and transparency in your supply chain and know where to work and who to work with. So it is more expensive and it's often more costly, but if you do it right and you've got a good supply chain system, then your prices aren't affected that bad.
And so is it as simple as, you know, I'm looking at 2 pair of shorts, you know, that you want to make a conscious decision at the store. And, you know, I've done my homework, that you guys are obviously paying attention to your supply chain impact and the impact it has on the world. You know, but your shorts are, you know, X plus 1 and the other shorts next to yours are Y. And so is it as simple as, you know, just sort of thinking, you know, is it worth that additional 20, 30, 50 bucks? Or is it a more complex decision matrix for you?
I think it's more complex, and I think there's no simple answer. And I always tell my students too, everybody, you know, whenever the question comes about as to which is better, what's the right decision, whether it's on materials or the question you just asked, it's always, well, it depends, right? So it depends on what that, you know, the financial resources of the potential customer. And I'm not going to bash somebody for saying, hey, I can't afford an $80 pair of shorts, but I can't afford a $40 pair of shorts. And maybe they came from H&M, but H&M has they're making some good efforts in sustainability as well. So it's not, I don't know, I don't like to demonize anybody, but I do feel that if you're in the position where you can support brands like ours, like KOZM, or other brands who are really making an effort to really push things all the way over here, then I just urge everybody to do so. You know, looking at like Outer Known. Outer Known was a great example where the products were so expensive, but it was catching on because people, of course you can get a pair of pants for cheaper. Of course you can get a t-shirt and a nice button-down shirt for cheaper. But if we can do so, the more we can choose and support those brands, the better off they are, the bigger voice they have, and the more it catches the eye and the recognition of the other brands who can do similar things at a much larger scale and really help push the needle even further.
Yeah, I certainly agree with all that. I think it's also thinking a bit further in terms of the life cycle of the good, of the apparel itself, and meaning, maybe I just need one pair of jeans or shorts that are going to last me forever, or, two pairs of super cheap stuff that you're probably going to throw away in a year, and just giving it a bit more thought.
Absolutely. And what's interesting, I was just I just gave a talk with a few others on a panel up in San Francisco at the Sustainable Fashion Alliance talk that we did. And that was the one audience that continued to come, the one question that came up continuously from the audience was, what are you doing to message to consumers that they need to stop buying so much? And I think it's a great point, but it's also a really mature stance for a brand to be able to take. So that is sort of I think the holy grail, changing consumer behavior. But at the same time, I also think that's just a small sliver. It's almost like the 1%, if you will, of consumers who are willing to say, you know what, I'll slow it down and I'll just buy that one pair of jeans. Most of the consuming population follows the cycle of like, hey, I need more. There's another one. I need it, So.
And per Patagonia's example, sometimes when you tell people don't buy this jacket, they buy it 10 times more. So
it backfires, right? It backfires in a good way, and it depends how you look at it. But yeah, that was definitely, that came up in the talk as well, because that's exactly what happened.
Well, I'm curious. You're a teacher, so you're bringing these insights and all of your experiences to the next generation of people who could potentially be working inside of all these organizations and helping to guide this change. Can you tell us a little bit about what you're focused on teaching and how you think the people that your students are going to be positioned to go out and work in organizations?
Yeah, I'm really excited about it because this came about. So I've worked with Orange Coast College for years. They're a really great community college. They've got a lot of good programs. I've been on the foundation board for years as well. So I was teaching just a regular fashion merchandising class there. But while I was teaching that class, I couldn't help but constantly interject what I know about merchandising and product development, which was just sustainability. So the students were always getting that any information anyway, but I had to stick to the curriculum that I was given. But I'm also kind of wherever I go, I'm always sort of known as just the sustainability guy, So people were excited about it, and we just started. The more we started talking, the more we said, hey, this should be its own class. We should have a sustainable fashion class, which led to, well, there's so much to do in sustainability. This should actually probably be a multi-course program, which we might as well turn into a certificate. So the program is broken into 3 classes. The first class is sort of a general look at sustainability, where we're learning about ecosystem services and what biodiversity is and what climate change is and how what we do affects that, how the oceans are tied in, and just sort of give them this general sense of the concept of sustainability and how it applies to apparel a little bit. The next class will be a deep dive into what's really happening in textiles and apparel, whether it's the Greenpeace detox movement, the roadmap to zero discharge of hazardous chemicals, or the Rana Plaza disaster and how that's affected the Who Made My Clothes movement and fashion revolution and so on and so forth, looking at every hot topic that there is and really diving into that. The third course then will be going out and studying brands and studying their messages, and the students by then should have a really good understanding of the difference between really genuine and effective programs that brands have in place, and comparing that to greenwashing, and being able to either give advice or solutions to brands that need them, or be able to pick apart somebody's sustainability strategy and sort of grade it, if you will, and say, hey, you know what, really good, strong program, or not so much, and do some really critical critiquing of them. So I feel like by the time they finish these 3 courses, my goal is to dump everything that I've got onto them, so they leave ready to be an expert in the field, whether they want to do consulting or work within a brand or be a designer or a merchandiser. hopefully they're armed with this information and can really contribute to this movement.
And is that something you can access online yet, or is that the plan for the future?
Not yet. I do often think of sometimes releasing that even on my own, doing the course because I'm developing all the coursework, which is fun, hard, and a lot of it's time consuming, but keep that for the college kids who need the credit for it, but then maybe also delivering this in a format, maybe it's online somehow or webinars, because I would love to just be able to share it, because it kind of goes from the inception of how the environmental movement started, looking at Silent Spring, and we'll get all the way down to, what Outer Known is doing and how they did it and why they're doing it. So hopefully give everybody the full arc of what sustainable fashion, looks like.
So we're certainly in discussions with Outdoor Industry Association. Of course, that's where we met, was at Sustainability Working Group meetings. Tell us about your familiarity with the Higg Index, with Bluesign. Obviously, you are. KOZM is a B Corp, as I'm super excited to say that we just got our own pending B Corp for Massive Impact, so super excited. Thank you. Talk to us about Higg Index and Bluesign and how that plays into both your work at KOZM as well as at the school, and then obviously where Volcom is with that these days.
Let's see. So Volcom just recently became an Outdoor Industry Association member, and we've sort of been kind of in talks with them for years. But gosh, I did the Higg Index for Volcom for years now, going back to the earliest beta. But we didn't really do a lot of public-facing messaging with it. So we've sort of done it internally year after year. We're about to embark on their latest beta as well for the new release, but just because Volcom put so much effort onto not effort, but even we had access to that environmental profit and loss, which was such an important tool, that we sort of, that's where the storytelling and all the efforts went. But we definitely use the Higg Index year after year, and it's just a great tool for setting a standard of assessment criteria on the environmental side, the social side. And that Higg Index is so important because what it does, that is, for any brands or people who are afraid to get in there and use it, you shouldn't be, because that is your roadmap. If you can answer yes, 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 then then that's how you get a great sustainability and social compliance program. The more questions you answer no to, that's okay. That just means, well, that's my to-do list, So, and I also urge anybody, it's like, a low score is okay, but it's that fact of making the step, doing the commitment, taking the assessment, and then looking to see where you need to go from there. But everything is contained in there. There's almost that you don't even need anybody else. Just do the Higg Index and just make those things that you said no to, make those your to-do list. So it is a really valuable and powerful tool for brands of all sizes.
Yeah, and I think we already fell, even though Margot and I are relative newbies, we already fell into the sustainability wonk category by assuming people know what the Higg Index is. So maybe we can back up and will you help us define it?
Yeah, it's an industry-wide assessment tool that's been in development for years now. It was funny, so the Outdoor Industry Association owned it, and eventually the Sustainable Apparel Coalition was formed by an unlikely get-together of Walmart and Patagonia. And that the SAC, as it's called, the Sustainable Apparel Coalition, now is sort of the driving force, industry collection for legislature and helping to set standards and drive initiatives through the entire kind of apparel industry. But their biggest, I think, victory is this Higg Index, it's called, which is just this amazing assessment tool. It's this online assessment tool where you go in, you pay for access to it, but it assesses how you're structured, what things you have in place, what you don't have in place, what you do, how you measure your chemicals, how you interact with your vendors, what type of fibers you're using, and basically it will expose all of your sustainability victories and sustainability shortcomings. So it's an online assessment tool. It's self-guided. You do it yourself. They're just starting now, to have verifiers who can then verify your assessment. But that assessment also is a great connecting tool because you post your score. Once you're done, you hit submit. You can then connect with other brands or other suppliers, and then you see each other's scores and report, and you can go through and see in all the different areas where certain vendors are strong, where they're weak, where they can get better, but you can work together to help each other improve and to sort of get through it. So it's I think it's a really powerful tool.
Yeah, agreed. And I think, we typically lean on the supply chain itself, the textiles and, the dyes and these kinds of things, but it's also a measure of, how the people are treated, what the condition of the factories are, and are they being paid a reasonable wage, et cetera. So it's certainly far-reaching and super important in that regard to make sure that it's, sort of all-inclusive. And so how are you using that with regards to, and so what are some of the challenges as a small organization at KOZM, as well as helping your students understand the importance of this and how they can help folks implement it, understanding that there are already a couple hundred members of the sustainability working group who are sort of at the front of the wave, so to speak. But it's a tremendous lift to go through the HIG for an organization like KOZM. And how do you work on the trade-offs of you need to work on your pricing and your business model and all the other things, but understanding that being part of this group of folks that are at the front of the wave is important.
Yeah, for KOZM though, we haven't been able to. One, I mean, we're so tiny that we don't use the HIG index, but even when you're a certified B Corp, as you know, you go through a similar assessment, so they're asking similar questions of how you're structured, what you're doing, do you know where your raw materials come from, where are you sourcing, how many miles for this and that. So it's a similar approach, but I think even for us, what we're doing with KOZM is so small. We know exactly where everything is. We're able to just sort of message to the customer, hey, here's what it is. It is what it is, and here's what it is, and here's where everything came from. But we'll eventually, once we got big enough, we would have for sure adopt that. But on the Volcom side, though, it's been a pretty easy buy, and I think just kind of sharing with the students, just that it exists, understanding what the language is around it, how it works, and how valuable it is, and knowing that it's important to see when a brand is utilizing it, and that when they're a part of the collection, that they're a part of something that is meaningful and good.
And what about Blue Sign? Obviously, if a particular manufacturer is Blue Sign certified, then you know that they're doing good things. Is that something that you look at as well?
Absolutely. Yep. And I think, Blue Sign is awesome, but it also, it's one of the things that it'll add costs. So it'll sometimes get sticky and hard, but you're definitely, once you see a Blue Sign certification or a Blue Sign logo, or somebody's using a Blue Sign certified material or process, then you're in good hands. And I'm a fan of those third-party validations, certifications, name brand things, because it just adds, I think, validity and credence and trust. So I'm a fan of supporting what Blue Sign does, but it's not easy to get, especially on the brand side, to get brands to buy on, or even to shift your manufacturers to buy on to become system partners. But if you can find manufacturers, mills who are, then that's your best bet. And like for Volcom, they're not a Blue Sign brand partner, but they do kind of seek out and choose where they can certain fabrics that are Blue Sign approved.
I just have one more question, and it's kind of forward-looking. So you've gotten to be in this space for quite some time and to see the evolution. Where do you think we're headed, and what do you hope this space looks like in 10 years from now?
I think so. I have moments where I'm really optimistic, and I get really optimistic when you're in the space and when you read the follow-up to the Copenhagen Fashion Summit, or their State of the Industry reports, or after a Sustainable Brands Conference, or when you're in the bubble of having everybody together and seeing what is happening, or you go to a Textile Exchange conference, for example, or any of those, then you get really excited and optimistic, because everything is it's all right there. And you can see that there are innovations happening, there's commitment, and there's great motivation and momentum. But then I always have this moment, though, where I get back on the freeway and you drive and you start passing strip malls and shopping places and big malls, and just you go, or you find yourself in one of those places and just go, how will we ever get there? It's just the reality of how most people, what they're trying to accomplish in life and where they're at on sort of the needs stage of life and what they're just trying to get through. And I have kids too, and I know we're fortunate in a sense, but I also know how that just puts things in perspective. So what families are trying to do to survive, to get by, and it goes back to that earlier stage where I think so much pressure needs to be put on the brands, because I think we can't leave it up to the individuals. So I think the future lies on brands stepping up, using this as an opportunity to differentiate themselves, show leadership, and help us change the way things are done. But we're not going to get there without the brands. And I think enough of the big brands are really making good headway. They have strong commitments that I think we're in a good space. And I'm hoping that the scales have tipped and there's no going back. I'm quite sure that's where we're at. So I think the future looks bright, but I think all of the pressure is on the brands, and I think we just can't rely very much on the consumer. So, but I think it's optimistic. I think it's bright. The future is bright.
Yeah, and I certainly agree with all that. I think for us, we will also, a big part of what we're doing and why we're doing this is to educate the consumer that, even a year ago, I didn't understand the life cycle of a cotton T-shirt, right? And why it was so problematic and why it was kind of a bullshit approach, right? And so, I think just having conversations with passionate folks like yourself and super knowledgeable folks like yourself, and we're excited that this is really just the beginning for us to help the consumer navigate what are difficult decisions. But at the same time, you've already provided a ton of resources and ideas for us to share, and super grateful for you being here. And why don't you maybe list a couple websites? Certainly, what is the KOZM website, and where would you direct folks on to your teachings? And I know you have a TEDx talk, and we can link that below, et cetera, et cetera. How else can we be of assistance to you?
Cool. I guess definitely follow us at the KOZM, KOZM, but that has a the in front of it, THEKOZM. Volcom is doing some really good things too, and you even mentioned the social side, and I'm proud to be affiliated with Volcom, as they just got their supply chain accredited by the Fair Labor Association, which is really awesome. So follow them at volcom.com/new future. They've got a really cool sustainability program coming in place. All of my social channels are Derek A. Sabori. And then I do my sustainability consulting and teaching goes under something called the Underswell. So I've got a sustainability-driven podcast as well, doing something similar, just interviewing brands and entrepreneurs and movers in the space. So you can follow me at the Underswell, or at my own channels, or the KOZM, or over there at Volcom.
Yeah, awesome. And Margot, you want to share your consulting site as well?
So I work under the auspices of NimbleMind, of nimblemind.com. And you can also find me on LinkedIn as I'm updating other projects that I'm working on.
Obviously, find us at massiveimpact.co, and then all of our socials are massiveimpactco as well. And then this will be up on YouTube and SoundCloud and iTunes and all the things. And Derek, super grateful for your time, and I'm sure that we will revisit this soon enough and learn about some of the cool stuff you're working on, and look forward to continuing to work with you.
Great. Thank you, Dave. Thank you, Margot. Thank you for your time. And I meant to plug too, you mentioned it, but even if people want to learn more, even about the supply chain, NPR did a great thing on the t-shirt called their Planet Money program, where they followed a t-shirt through all the supply chains. That's an easy watch, but you can find that on the Planet Money site on NPR if you want to learn more about the supply chain and all the processes that we go through when we're making garments, and it includes a look at just the people behind it as well. So,
yeah, appreciate that. And then I'll link. There was a TEDx talk, or actually I think it was a TED.com talk that talked about it as well. I'll link those below. And thanks for being here. You guys have a great day.
You too, guys. Thank you.
Thanks.